I'm mad because every high school recruit that I talk to acts like Group of Five offers aren't from Division I schools. They all are looking for something bigger and better.
Welcome into College Football Today. You just heard from the coach, Carl Reed. Also on the program today is our friend Chris Hummer. I'm Emily Proud. Here is your reminder that if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We already have tons of questions in the chat. A lot of people are watching. I know that we're all kind of caught up in the madness that is March with college basketball, but the true college football fans are watching right now, so be sure to submit some questions. We would love to answer them during this show. Also, let us know you're watching by smashing that like button. We already have some questions, Carl, but I got a question for you as to why you're mad. And I want to ask, what do you tell those high school prospects? What's your message to them when they come to you and they say, ugh, a G5 offer, still haven't gotten that P5 one yet?
Well, number one, their film probably dictates that they're not a Power Five player. That's the first thing that you have to talk about. The second thing is you better be appreciative that you got a scholarship offer because there's a lot of people in this world that would like to go to college for free. And so when you get the opportunity to go to a college for free at the Division I level, I think that you should be ecstatic about that. And I've seen many kids, I see it happen every year, every season, guys that have a solid group of list of Group of Five offers. They're waiting on the Big Ten. They're waiting on the SEC. Those spots fill up. They never get those Power Five offers, and then they're in a real bad situation with no place to go to school.
Yeah, it's tough to have perspective when you're 16 or 17. I remember when I was 16 or 17, all I wanted was the newest shoes, whatever Xbox or video game came out. Wanted to go to the best school possible. I wasn't necessarily great at having my feet where they should be. But I would certainly stress to anybody that debt sucks. And if you can avoid having student loans, avoid having student loans. I can certainly say that. Um, and college football is college football. We're going to talk about the G5 later, and there's a ton of good football being played there, ton of good coaches on that level, a ton of players being drafted. I think that's the important part. If you're good, you can get drafted from anywhere. And I think players need to realize that their best situation might not always be at the P5 level. Their best situation might be going somewhere and having the opportunity to play right away. Their best situation might be going somewhere and playing for that position coach you really trust over just a brand. So there's a lot of factors that go into that, and I totally agree. Players certainly need to be more receptive to all the Division I offers they get.
That's why I'm glad that we have this show to be able to talk about some parts of college football that aren't always discussed. We get caught up in the NIL of all of it and the big-time players and draft and who's going in the first round and who are the 5 stars. But there are so many college football players out there, and there's a lot of opportunity for everyone. And as you said, that there are some different opportunities based on different factors, you know, like a coach or a situation could be better for one or the other. I see, Carl, I don't know if you got your hand raised there, but I'd love to get your perspective on just this part of college football that's maybe under-discussed compared to all the big-time top prospects.
Tons of good football players at the G5 level, tons of good football players at the FCS level. Just because you don't go play in the SEC or the Big Ten or the Pac 12 doesn't mean that you're not a really good football player. It's talented guys on every roster. There are great coaches at that level. How many of the coaches that are in the P5 started off at the Group of Five level? You're talking about Division I schools, full rides, exciting brands of football, innovative things on offense, innovative things on defense, and you have to be a really good player to be on that level playing too. And a lot of guys that are getting recruited, they'll say, well, they feel disrespected because they're going to a Group of Five school, and maybe a guy they beat in high school is going to play at a P5, and they look at it and internalize it that way. But recruiting is not based on those factors that they often are considering. There's a lot of other factors in recruiting that matter when you start splitting up who's going where. And I think that guys that have an opportunity to go to Group of Five schools, it should be something you're extremely excited about.
College football also isn't linear anymore. This is not a thing where you're on a path and you're stuck there for 5 years. The transfer portal exists. If you take care of your business, you go to a G5 school, and you perform and you want to go in the transfer portal to explore your other options, that's always going to be there. So I hope players remember that as they plan out their path too. There are a ton of ways to approach college football in 2023, and there's no one set path for everyone.
Well
Chris, the
said.
flip side of that though is there were a lot of good players from the G5 that
Yeah.
went in the transfer portal and ended right back up in the G5. So just because you go there and you play extremely well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to move up. It was some great players at those levels that ended up just going to another school at the same level, and they were surprised by that.
Oh, yeah. It's not a perfect system. The grass is not necessarily always greener. But Chris said it earlier, we are going to talk a lot of G5 on the show in just a little bit. And before we get there, though, we have to hit some news. And guys, there's really no easy transition to us talking about the Group of Five and how it still matters, and then transitioning to a story about the SEC. And that is the Missouri Tigers, the first SEC program to hit the field for their spring game. That's right, not just spring practice, an actual spring scrimmage. You can tell we got a little bit of film from it, but it was not televised. They had to bring it inside. Apparently the weather there, not so great. But Carla, I'll start with you here. I mean, it's your neck of the woods. I'm not going to ask about the weather. It's chilly everywhere right now. But what did we learn about the Tigers that we didn't already know in this spring game?
The Tigers defense is going to be strong again, returning a lot of guys. But at the quarterback position, Garcia from the University of Miami, he's been okay, but he hasn't just blown it away yet from all the words that are coming out of Columbia. Expect for Sam Horn, who's entering his sophomore year, to get a huge chance at the spot. And we still cannot count out Brady Cook that started every game at quarterback for the Missouri Tigers last year, but is out this spring with injury.
Yeah, I totally want to echo what Carl said about the quarterback situation. It's far from set exiting spring. Brady Cook, their starter last year, missed the entire spring with an injury. Sam Horn has been limited in spring practice because of an injury he sustained in baseball, but he was still getting a lot of QB1 reps this spring. And Jake Garcia was up and down, which is something we saw at Miami. And if you want to pull the lens out with Missouri, Missouri returns a ton of production. This is a team set up to win in 2023 if things go right. But Eli Drinkowitz has been unable to really get that quarterback situation correct. He's missed on several transfer targets the last couple cycles. We've seen a total offensive overhaul on staff this offseason as Eli Drinkowitz enters a pretty make or break 2023 season for him. And it's paramount that this quarterback situation works out. And he's really banking on Sam Horn or Jake Garcia, two young players developing. And I'm not really sure we saw the steps necessary from either player this spring to project one of the two will be a breakout star for Missouri this season. There's still a lot of questions to answer for Missouri exiting spring.
Yeah, we actually had Eli Drinkowitz on the show a few weeks ago and talked to him about just the influx of returning talent. I know their defensive coordinator said that he was pleasantly surprised by how many of those guys that could have gone on to enter the NFL draft, decided to come back and play another season for the Tigers. But, despite being top 10 in returning production, according to ESPN, it is still that question mark at the quarterback position that lingers. Carl, what's your take on where they are with QB?
Well, I think that Sam Horn is very talented. He's just extremely unproven. And the fact that he was playing baseball and kind of got banged up doing that, it took away his opportunity in the spring. I think that the optimism is that Sam Horn has all of the tools to be a big-time quarterback. They're returning big-time weapons at receiver, added a couple key pieces there in the transfer portal, as well as their backfield looks to be in good shape. And they are still going to be a program that's carried by their defense. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. My bet would be that we'll see a lot of Sam Horn this fall, and we never know what happens in the SEC, but a great defense can take you a long way as well.
Reports out of that spring game did indicate that Horn took the majority of the snaps with the first team, Garcia with the second team. So we'll see what happens there. Another bit of news, though, over in the Big 12, they are apparently partnering with the NFL for a conference-wide pro day. This is something that's been kind of discussed in the college football landscape over the last few years. They are going to do it in 2024 at the Star in Frisco, Texas. I'm sure you heard of that venue. So I'll start with Chris here. How much is this really just another indication of maybe the Big 12 being proactive in the ever-changing college football landscape?
New Commissioner Brett Yormark last year really emphasized being proactive and being very active in this space. to put the Big 12 in the best position possible. We've seen the Big 12 be very aggressive in conference realignment discussions. We've seen the Big 12 be very active with their new television contract, getting out ahead of the Pac-12 in that regard. And as you said, Emily, I think this is another example of this. Pro days aren't sexy. It's just 2 hours of players running drills, a lot of scouts just mingling around, not a lot happening as a television product. But if you combine 12 schools and put them in one place, it does become a pretty compelling product to put on television, especially for a network like the NFL Network that doesn't have a lot to show this time of year with no NFL games going on. So this is just a smart way for the Big 12 to create another revenue stream. And I think it's an easy sell for players too, because it puts you in front of a larger group of scouts and personnel. With 12 teams in attendance, no NFL team is going to miss this. They're going to send multiple scouts. Some GMs might be in attendance like they would at the Combine. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for the Big 12 players. And I also think this is a really smart move by the Big 12 teams and Brett Yormark to provide a little additional revenue and squeeze everything you can out of the product that you have.
This is a great move by the Big 12. You think that they're tired, Chris, of hearing about the SEC and the moves that the Big 10 have made? They're trying to push back and show too. If you're a recruit right now, you have to look at this and say, this is a solid thing that helps recruiting. The Big 12 has partnered with the NFL for the Pro Day. Where are you trying to go play professional football at? In the NFL. Chris hit it on the head. Every team is going to be represented. They're going to have multiple scouts, multiple front office execs, multiple personnel that can make decisions. So all eyes are going to be on the Big 12. I think that it's a phenomenal move when we've spent all offseason talking about the SEC. We've spent all offseason talking about the Big 10. This is an opportunity for the Big 12 to show that they're a real deal conference, and they'll get center stage with all their best players in front of the NFL on the NFL Network.
Yeah, I mean, they immediately reacted to Texas and OU leaving by adding 4 new members. You also saw some of the unique things, I guess I'll call it, that they did at the Big 12 men's basketball tournament. They wrote like an anthem with a musician. They also, debuted some sort of partnership with a streetwear brand. And so you can tell that Brent Yormark is really showing his true colors when it comes to, his previous career path and coming in the entertainment business. And so they're doing new things, and credit to them. But Carl, you mentioned the players. I'm curious, how does this affect the players? Because there's kind of two sides to the coin, right? Is that some that might have been at a school that didn't have a ton of prospects will now get seen with a lot of these general managers. But also, there's the side of it where you see some of these big-time prospects that choose not to undergo testing at the Combine because they want to be in the comfort of their own home stadium or wherever they do their pro day. So how do you see this affecting the players of the Big 12?
The big-time guys, they're all in a league of their own. They're pretty much set. They know what draft position and they're going to go in. Not many things you can do would affect guys that are automatically know they're going to be first or second round picks. But this is going to help those back end guys, those guys that are day 3 guys, those guys that are on the fringe in terms of being an undrafted free agent or a preferred free agent going into camp. This is a tremendous opportunity for them because they're going to be seen by everyone. Maybe on your own pro day, you would have only got 20 out of the 32 teams. Maybe you get 18, maybe you get 25. But you get an opportunity to be seen by everybody and be evaluated. You might can show that you have some special teams value or that you can fit a specific role, and somebody possibly could see you that wasn't thinking about you before, and it makes them go back and dig through your tape before the draft and evaluate you again. And so this is a really, really great opportunity for the players that have dreams of playing in the league that were not going to get the exposure necessarily that they would have got otherwise.
Totally agree with Carl. Frisco, Texas is pretty central. Everybody can get to the DFW area. And it's not just NFL scouts that are going to see some of these guys at the back end of rosters. There are 3 other professional football leagues in North America with the Canadian Football League, the XFL, and the USFL. Scouts from those organizations are going to be able to attend this too. There's going to be an avenue for more players to be seen by more scouts and have more professional opportunities because of this combine. We're combining a bunch of players in one place. Like, these scouts don't have to get to Morgantown. They don't have to get to Manhattan, Kansas. They don't have to get to the many locations that the Big 12 is now stationed in. Central Florida, you got Cincinnati. Like, there's a lot of places these scouts would have to travel. Now they have to be in one place at one time for the Big 12's event. So I think this is a huge benefit to players. I'm not sure on the specifics in terms of whether QBs can make their own scripts if the NFL is running this like they might before. So it might hurt those guys a little bit. Maybe not quite as friendly on the stopwatches with the guys making the timings, but it's usually scouts running those things anyway. So overall, I think it's a really huge benefit to the players because you have more eyes on you.
So our friend and colleague Brandon Marcello is in the chat right now. And if you are watching and wondering where the heck's the chat, that's because you are not subscribed. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can see it. He says that pro days are great opportunities for scouts, general managers, and coaches to visit schools and get advanced scouting on players for the next year, more so than that year. He says this could actually hurt the Big 12. Chris, what's your take on that?
I mean, that's true, but if your scouts are doing their homework, you know who's coming up anyway. Like, these guys, you're watching tape for current players, and then how you scout the next year is when you see these guys pop up on tape. These current players in the 2024 draft and 2025 draft aren't exactly doing combine drills in the majority of cases. They might step onto a scale, and an NFL team might see them. But I think overall, the best players are still going to be found. And I think the Big 12 would take the media exposure payoff rather than trading in maybe one or two of their top players from the next year's cycle getting exposure in person. I think ultimately it's worth it for the brand of the Big 12. And the best players are still going to be found anyway.
You agree, Carl?
Brandon Marcello was at home drinking a Dr.
Oh,
Pepper
no.
and smoking a hookah. All right, typing in the message board. Listen here, Brandon. This is not going to hurt anybody. NFL scouting is too expensive. They have too many resources. They hardly ever miss players. This is going to be, it does change things in terms of you do get to ask a lot about the younger guys when you're on campus. But the NFL also wanted this, not just the Big 12. So I'm sure the NFL has thought through every possible scenario, and those guys in the next year are still going to get drafted and be in great position.
Yep. When it comes to the NFL, too, this is also an opportunity for them to potentially test out this area because the Combine could be on the move, could be saying goodbye to Indy, and so they'll see if the Star makes for a good host there. We've got some Group of Five conversation coming up.
Oh, hello. I'm Josh Pate. I want to thank you, by the way, for watching the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Double clap. But also, breaking news, 85% of you are still unsubscribed to the channel, and it's free. I've done it, and I've liked the video as well. So click that subscribe button, like the video you're watching, and make everyone around the office a lot happier.
Right, so we have a whole segment planned out, but like I said, we are answering your questions, and we actually have a G5 conversation question here from Lou King. So get excited for this one, guys, asking, Arkansas State is on the up and up. Butch Jones landed the top recruiting class in the SBC. What can we predict from the Red Wolves this fall, my man Chris? What do you think?
Arkansas State is getting better.
They are.
Yeah, they took over a really rough situation there. I realized the Blake Anderson situation was sad when it ended, but Butch Jones had a lot to correct when he got there. Not the easiest schedule for Arkansas State this year out of conference. You start with Oklahoma, but you always expect to take your lumps. But it'll be really interesting in the Sun Belt to see where they fit. They had a really strong recruiting class, really strong transfer class as well. I don't anticipate Arkansas State winning the Sun Belt this year. I would be surprised. I still think a team like Troy or a team like South Alabama is the favorite in that league. But Arkansas State is getting better year by year. And I think that's a credit to Butch Jones and his staff. He's put together a really talented young staff that's recruited really well so far. And I think they'll only continue to move up in the ranks of that league.
Arkansas State had a great run of coaches, Chris, when you think back to Hugh Freeze, Gus Malzahn, Brian Harsin, and then Blake Anderson, and it's fallen off a little bit. They went on a run where they really, really dominated the Sun Belt. I think that they've done a better job recruiting. Butch has fixed some things that he needed to fix coming in, like you said, but I still don't think they're ready to take over the Sun Belt quite yet. I still think look at them kind of as a middle of the pack team. They've still got some pieces to the puzzle they have to put together.
Yeah, They missed on a couple quarterback transfer targets this offseason. I will say that. They ended up with JT Stroud coming over from Colorado. JT hasn't exactly been a stellar quarterback in his career. He's had his struggles at Tennessee and never could quite latch on at Colorado. Maybe Arkansas State can get the most out of him, but that is still a position Arkansas State needs to solve.
Yep. As the resident Tennessee fan, I'm not going to comment on that, but no. Lou, we really do appreciate the question there, and if you guys have any more questions, please submit them. There's a lot of fun conversations going on in the chat right now. I don't see a lot of question marks, though, so I will keep checking that out to see what you guys have to say. And the whole reason that we're talking about G5 today is we're kind of inspired by March Madness, by those Cinderella stories, and it's something that we've talked about as not necessarily being replicable in college football, and that just the big gap between some of these G5 programs and P5 programs is much wider. We're probably not going to see a Princeton all of a sudden go to the college football playoff, but we will enjoy them playing in the Sweet 16 right now. But along those lines, we did kind of see a bit of a Cinderella story last year with Tulane doing what they were able to do, not expecting them to have the turnaround that they had and to be able to finish the season with double-digit wins and come away as, you know, a winner of a New Year's Six Bowl. So who is this year's Tulane? Who is a potential Cinderella-type story that we could see come out of nowhere in the group of five, Carl?
Well, first off, Emily, I did expect Tulane to be really good because their coach is Willie Fritz. And Willie Fritz is a guy that has won every single place that he's been. And this is one of the cool things when you pay attention to the group of five level. Willie Fritz has won as a junior college coach. Willie Fritz has won as a Division II coach. And he's won as an FCS coach, playing in 2 FCS national championships. And now he's taken the group of five level by storm, first at Georgia Southern and now at Tulane. He's put together a remarkable program. And I think that as long as he's there, they're going to still continue to have that consistency where they're going to be at the top of the group of five game. He was involved in some coaching searches a year ago, but would not leave his team before the conference championship, which ended up hurting him at places such as Georgia Tech, who were rushing to make an announcement. So Willie Fritz is a guy that has his program at the top of that G5 level, and I think that they're there to stay. They have great coaches. They lost their defensive coordinator. Chris Hampton left to be a linebacker coach at the University of Oregon. So that shows you that Willie Fritz is identifying coaches. I also think that you can't ignore Liberty. Liberty did lose Hugh Freeze, but they went out and got Coach Chadwell from Coastal Carolina. They have been programs that have been showing that they have consistency and that they're serious about football, that they're putting resources into it, and they become a destination for some really good football players. So I look at Tulane and Liberty to kind of stay at the top in the thick of that.
I actually really love the Liberty pick. And if we talk about long-term, Liberty is a school I would really pay attention to in the G5 level. They have the resources. They pump into that program to a degree where Liberty can be a very good team in the G5 for a long period of time. If we're talking about next year specifically, especially in the G5 level, I think you have to look at returning production. It really matters. Continuity on that level is huge. And South Alabama returns the 13th most production in the FBS this year. Kane Womack did a great job there this past season. If you think about that loss to UCLA that they had early in the season, and they had one 4-point loss to Troy in the middle of the season, this is a team that we could have been talking about as a potential college football playoff crasher. Had things changed just a little bit for them, I think they'll be excellent again this season. I'm going to do with a little bit of a curveball here. It's going to be tough for any team moving in the American this year, but I really like what FAU brings back. I think they are able to potentially compete right away with Tom Herman. They added a couple of impact quarterbacks. They return almost everyone from last year's starting lineup. I think Tom Herman is the type of coach who has proven he can have success right away if he inherits a roster good enough to do so. We saw it at Houston. I don't know if FAU is going to be the New Year's Six team for the G5 next year, but I think in a pretty open American conference where I would still favor SMU as the team that's going to be at the top of that heap, I think FAU could really make some noise along with teams like UTSA and SMU in that league.
Yeah, the Owls can learn a thing or two about what their basketball team is doing right now, heading to New York City to play in the Sweet 16. So we'll see if there's a little bit of a trickle-down effect with their football program. I do think that, we've got an interesting poll going on right now. Who could be the next elite G5 program? The reason that I want to ask that question to you guys is if you look at, the automatic bid that the best Group of 5 school gets into the New Year's Six Bowl. It's going to be a similar thing when we do have the expansion of the playoff and that they are expected to get an auto bid into the postseason. If you look at it, 4 of the last 9 schools to go through it are now no longer Group of 5 schools. They're moving up to the Power 5. And so that begs the question, who is the next G5 elite of the next, maybe, 5 to 10 years, the ones that we're going to be talking about playing in the postseason? Chris, I'll start with you.
I think this just comes down to resources. It is the teams that are willing to invest the money to be good at that level. Obviously, great head coaches can change that. Willie Fritz changes the equation for Tulane. Not every school has a Willie Fritz. So you have to find a combination of head coach and a team willing to invest, to catch fire the way we've seen Cincinnati, UCF, Boise State do in the past. I look at James Madison and I look at Liberty. I look at 2 schools that by far outspend the rest of their conferences. James Madison moving into the Sun Belt, Liberty moving into Conference USA, compared to their peers. I look at 2 schools that have had a lot of success the last couple seasons. James Madison particularly, they have shown no signs of dropping since moving in from the FCS. They were already one of the best teams in the Sun Belt last year when they weren't actually capable of winning the conference championship. So those are 2 programs I really think have a bright future because they spend to do so. Carl, I don't mean to take so much airtime away from you, but I would always think about a South Florida. I would always think about a Memphis. I would always think about a UNT, a Texas State, a UTSA, teams in large population areas that are capable of doing something like UCF created, relying on really good athletes in an area with a ton of students and a ton of population to draw from. So those are all schools that are at the top of my list. I throw in San Diego State too, but we don't know how long they're even going to be a G5 program. Same with SMU. So those are some of the schools that jump out to me.
When you think about Power 5, I think that you think about resources, who's spending the most money, incredible facilities. But when you think about Group of 5, I think it is a coach's ball game. I don't think that there will ever be any one program that dominates at the Group of 5 level, say the way that Alabama has done in the past or that Georgia is doing now. I think that you're going to have a situation where whoever identifies the best coach, when you think about what Memphis did when they had Mike Norvell, when you think about what Western Michigan did when they had PJ Fleck, think about Boise State with Chris Peterson, guys like Brian Harsin. There are all of these group of what UTSA has been able to do by holding on to Coach Jeff Traylor. When you guys are looking at Group of 5 programs, we have to look at the coaches. And those coaches at the G5 level, they end up being the next big time coaches at the Power 5 level. I think that when we talk Appalachian State had Scott Satterfield. They had Eli Drinkwitz, that's the head coach now at the University of Missouri. When you think about Liberty with Hugh Freeze, when you think about Cincinnati, who had Luke Fickell, those guys were big time coaches. They moved on. So whoever, as an administration, a president, a search firm, an AD, can identify who those next big time coaches are, those are the guys that are going to win at the Power 5 level. Guys that can run a program, guys that have innovative and up-to-date systems. That's where the next coaching stars typically come from. And you see programs go on runs when they have one of those type of coaches. You don't typically see them stay on the run when that coach leaves.
Can I interject something real quick to that point?
Please do.
I totally agree with Carl. You have to have the coach in these situations. Like, there's no question about that. Boise State isn't what it is without Chris Peterson. TCU isn't in the Big 12 without Gary Patterson. Like, these things are facts. But you also have to be willing to invest. Like, money still matters. Like, Jeff Traylor has lost a ton of assistants the last couple of years to Power 5 schools coming in and poaching. They've ponied up and they've built facilities there to keep him happy and keep him in place. But that's because UTSA has had to invest to do so. That's why I think of a place like Colorado State, which got Jay Norvell, because I don't think Jay Norvell was entirely happy with the facilities at Nevada and the things he was getting investment there. So you still get those coaches to stay and to stay longer when you invest, which is why I think it's a balance between the two things we pointed out. I think you still have to have those G5 schools that are willing to spend and invest in their product. Otherwise, that coach just isn't going to stay there for long.
Yeah, and
I also think that Jeff Traylor is an outlier, Chris, because he was a Texas high school coach. So his desire to stay in the state of Texas also made him an outlier in the situation. But if those big jobs come open in Texas, hey man, we'll see what happens then.
we've also seen sitting head coaches in the group of five leave to go take coordinator jobs at the Power Five. So that does indicate the discrepancy between, the money that they could be offered there. But Carl, you mentioned it. Even if an athletic director is able to get that hire right, the double-edged sword of it is that chances are that coach will then move on to a bigger gig and to a Power Five gig. From a coaching standpoint, though, I mean, what goes into making a successful transition for a coach when they're moving on from the group of five to the Power Five?
Recruiting is different. So typically when you're recruiting at the group of five level, you're going after guys that are happy that they're getting a scholarship. They may just have a couple of offers. But when you get into the Power Five level of recruiting, you're talking about wars. Now you're talking about recruiting guys that everybody in the country covets, and it becomes much more difficult to win those recruiting battles. You also have to be able to operate a bigger staff. Now you have a huge recruiting department, something that you may not have been used to dealing with in the past. You also are more readily having to deal with boosters and donors and people that donate lots of money having a say so and wanting to be involved in your program. So the transition of guys who go from group of five to Power Five is typically not a football thing that stifles them. It's typically how they deal with boosters, donors, friends of the programs, and how they handle those big time recruiting battles, because recruiting is war at the top level.
I absolutely agree with Carl. Recruiting is the separator. And if you think about it, like the best coaches we have in college football right now, the national championship coaches, I think only one of them, Mac Brown, has ever gone from a G5 to a P5 school right away. Nick Saban had a short stint in the MAC 1 year before he went to the NFL and eventually ended up at Michigan State. But when you're talking about the best coaches in the sport, they actually haven't really taken that G5 to P5 path. And if you kind of step back a level and you look at the top 15 coaches in terms of salary in the sport, the ones that have gone from the G5 to the P5 have one really successfully identifiable skill. You're talking about Lane Kiffin, Josh Heupel, Mario Cristobal, Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is at San Diego, which is not a Division I program. I'm sorry, it's not a FCS. I'm sorry, it's not a G5 program. It is the FCS program, but he still made the jump. But all of these coaches, along with Brian Kelly and Matt Rule, have an identifiable skill. For Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin, it's their offenses. For Brian Kelly, it's the ability to build and sustain. For Matt Rule, it's your ability to identify and develop. For Jim Harbaugh, it's your ability to be Jim Harbaugh, and that's not giving Jim Harbaugh enough credit whatsoever. But these coaches succeed making this jump because they are special at what they do in one way or another. You either have to be an excellent recruiter or you have to have one skill set, usually on the offensive side of the ball, that allows you to make that transition. And not everybody has that. If you don't have that recruiting element, it's really difficult and it's really hard to hang on.
So, Carl, how do you weigh that group of five head coaching experience versus a Power Five coordinator experience? Because I know that we see a lot of coordinators make that jump to the head coaching position if they already have that experience in the Power Five. I mean, how much does recruiting kind of have to do with that?
Recruiting matters a lot. If you're a head coach at the group of five level and you get promoted, what I like to look at and identify is, did you just inherit a great group of five team and you won for a year or two and now you're getting to move up? A lot of times those guys have trouble. I would need to see that you actually recruited several classes and that you were able to sustain your momentum and win with some consistency, and that was actually the program that you built before I would pay you that kind of money to lead my program. The biggest indicator of success a lot of times is past success. Guys who consistently win typically consistently win wherever they go. But guys who kind of lucked up into certain situations, sometimes they get promoted and they can't handle it. And so I think that recruiting is the big thing. Guys that have been coordinators at the Power 5 level, their biggest adjustment is can they deal with all of the day-to-day stuff, because they have, for the most part, shown that they can recruit at a high level. Now it's can they deal with the people, because you have to wear a lot of hats when you're a Division I coach. And the most frustrating thing when you get to the Power 5 level is you're going to probably be put in a position where you're coaching the least amount of football that you ever have, and you're dealing with more politics and meetings and things of that nature.
Love it. All right, I got one final question for you guys, because we've been so positive about the Group of Five and how do you succeed and who's going to be the best teams. Now it's time to look at the future of the Group of Five, and this is a popular conversation to talk about the super conferences and what the expanded playoff is going to look like and what the future of college football looks like with the rich getting richer and all these things. Where does that leave the Group of Five? We know that they already have an invitation to this next 12-team version of the expanded playoff, but that's not going to last forever. We're not always going to have this iteration of it. So I'll start with you, Carl. I mean, where do you see the future of the Group of Five in the ever-changing college football landscape?
It's going to be a really rough time on the Group of Five right now because of the landscape of the market. You'll have programs like Tulane and Liberty that have resources like Chris talked about early. That'll be fine. But you're in a position now because of the transfer portal and because of NIL money. Really good players in the Group of Five are going to be leaving almost as soon as they're good enough to leave. So as a coach at the Group of Five level right now, you have to recruit. It's like a speed dating situation. Tougher to build culture, tougher to build consistency, but you've got to know as soon as one of your guys makes it big in terms of being a first team all conference or is making significant plays, they're jumping in the portal because not only do they want to play on the bigger stage, they also want to get paid. And the Group of Five schools, for the most part, don't have the huge collectives to pay those guys the money to keep them at their programs.
Absolutely. You have to be super nimble. I think of a Western Kentucky. Tyson Helton's had staff and players poached left and right the last couple of years, and he's still been really successful because he's been willing to adapt to what he has in front of him in terms of a roster. I was talking to a Group of Five head coach the other day, sitting in his office, and he said one of the biggest problems of this era is you used to be able to win some recruiting battles via relationships. You got to know a player better. You sat with him and his family. Like, they chose you because they trusted you, maybe spurning some Power 5 offers that they had at some lower Power 5 schools. And then he also he can't really do that anymore because NIL exists. And there's just such a big gap in terms of not only revenue for these schools, but their collective's willingness to pay up, their ability to compete from a facility perspective, their ability to compete from even a stipend perspective. Like, a lot of these SEC schools are giving out $6,000 a semester. A lot of the G5 schools can't come close to matching that. So it's really difficult to measure up when you're the G5 in that perspective. And it's only going to get worse as the revenue gap expands. We talk a lot about the Big Two, the SEC and the Big Ten versus the rest of the Power 5. But imagine being ULM with an athletic budget of $20 million a year, trying to compete with Texas with an athletic budget of $220 million. That's only going to balloon once they get that SEC money. It's really difficult. So I think ultimately the goal is still to climb that ladder, like we've seen teams like TCU do, like we've seen recently UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston do as well. But that path gets even tougher in the future because there are more walls around getting to that area of the Power 5 and making that type of money to really be seen as attractive for those brands and for those television networks.
We've already seen the Group of Five teams get picked apart in the transfer portal. I mean, in our transfer portal rankings, only one Group of Five team is in the top 50, and that is SMU. And so it's I'm sorry, it's not SMU, but it's just it is SMU. Okay, the screen's very far away. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to read this on the fly. SMU is our only school that we have in the top 50, and so it's difficult for some of these schools to be able to replenish their rosters through the transfer portal. But I do have to ask, I mean, you look at what we've already seen, the success rate in the New Year's Six Bowls. I mean, they're 4-5, the Group of Five, and we've talked about this, and that You can question the level of excitement and energy that you get from the Power 5 school that's playing against the Group of 5 opponent in the bowl games. There is, without a doubt, a difference between playing in a college football playoff, in the 12-team playoff, versus playing in that New Year's Six bowl. But Chris, what do you anticipate the success rate will be for that Group of 5 team when they, get that invitation to the playoff?
I don't think you're going to see a lot of 16-1 upsets. I'll put it that way. But you'd say the same thing in college basketball. I will say, it's possible. I think if you look at how the 12-team playoff would have stacked up this year, TCU would have hosted Tulane. Tulane could have easily won that game. Tulane beat Kansas State earlier in the year on the road. And that's what a G5 team has to be capable of doing. Not only do you have to match up from a talent perspective and a scheme perspective, you're going to have to go on the road in this iteration of the playoff format to win. And that's extremely tough to do, especially when you're at a talent disadvantage. So while I can definitely see it happening, there are definitely going to be some G5 teams that upset the team they're playing in the first round that's hosting them. It's going to be almost impossible for a G5 team to sustain a run to get all the way up that bracket to the national championship game. Because not only do you have to beat one really good team in the first round, you have to do it 3 more times to win a national championship. And the talent gap in college football is to the point where it's going to be very difficult for a team and the G5 level to sustain that success over an extended period of time.
Styles make fights, and I think that with following what Chris said, you're going to have a situation where it may be a bad matchup, so somebody gets a first-round loss, but I don't see a G5 team being able to win 3 games to get to that championship and win it in the college football playoffs. This is in basketball, where 1 or 2 players can make a huge difference. Football is just a physical game, and some of those programs are going to have too much depth and too much talent at the line of scrimmage. They only make so many huge linemen in the world, and mostly all of them are playing at the big-time schools.
Yeah, there is a slight difference between college football and college basketball, but yeah, we're probably not going to see those 16-1 upsets or 12-1 or however the playoff will be formatted. But we got a question here from Don. FCS has a playoff, so why not have a G5 playoff? Carl, what are your thoughts on that potential?
I don't think that will ever happen. It's a good idea in theory, but from a financial standpoint, I don't know how that makes sense, for the bigger schools. We're losing a lot of G5 schools that are getting plucked up by Power 5 conferences. Also, I don't think that's something that they will ever add into the equation of the college football playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with Carl. At the end of the day, I think college football is still beautiful and can still work because it's aspirational. You can be Western Michigan and you can row the boat all the way to New Year's Six game. That is possible in the iteration of college football we have. I think a lot of fan bases would check out if that hope isn't there at the start of every season. If you're South Alabama and you run the table, you can get to the college football playoff. You can play with the big boys. You can maybe parlay that into more admissions. You could parlay that into better recruiting. We've seen teams like TCU and Boise State become national brands because of having success in big-time stages and big-time bowl games. Cincinnati, UCF are in the Big 12 now, in part because of their recent success. And I think if you take away that hope, you take away that ladder out of the darkness. I don't want to say the G5 is darkness. It's a great brand of football. But you provide that light of more revenue and bigger stages. I think that's a huge thing. I think of this as an example. One of my favorite football games from the 2022 season was in the FCS playoffs. Incarnate Word and Sacramento State played an absolute barn burner. It was 66-63, tons of future, maybe not NFL players, but a ton of future pros, a couple players who ended up transferring to Division I. But that game didn't really make much of a ripple on the national stage because it was the FCS playoffs. And I don't think the G5 ever wants to put itself in a position where the G5 playoffs don't make a ripple because it's so far removed from the larger pool of college football that the general fan cares about. And I think that's what you risk losing if you create a G5 playoff specifically.
Yeah, you want them to be a part of, as we call it in March, the big dance. And just in general, too, having them still be a part of FBS football. If they detach, then it's kind of their own thing, and you have to rely on, the diehard fans of those schools to just watch it. And this way it kind of brings in a more collective, unity with that. And so I do think that it's an interesting question, but Yeah, I'm not so sure if that's necessarily something that's going to happen. I've got a comment here from our own account saying, come on, guys, we're almost to 50 likes. So go ahead and get there before the show is over. We're going to give you our final takeaways. But yes, if you have not already, hit that like button. Would love to get to 50 likes. Again, we're in the middle of March, and we still have a ton of college football fans watching this. So really excited about that. But it is time for our College Football Today takeaway. Chris, take it away first.
I think more recruits need to listen to Coach Carl Reed and his advice about how to handle G5 scholarships. They're a great opportunity, and they certainly shouldn't be disrespected.
And about all things, just always listen to Carl's advice. I feel like, anytime you need something, call Coach Carl.
Maybe not the ability to carefully pack breakable objects in your house.
Oh, that sounds like targeted. Carl, your thoughts? So for those of us, aka everybody watching the show except for the three of us who were on the meeting earlier today, Carl was tasked with moving some flower vases for his wife, and instead decided to throw the box, did not realize that there were a bunch of breakable objects in it, and spent the afternoon covering up glass. Carl, your thoughts?
Well, that was a big time cleanup job, and I got it done. And I actually told my wife before she got home, so she has spent the day being mad. So hopefully she's calmed down a little bit before she gets home, and I don't have to hear it. I don't have to hear her talk to me like she's Bobby Knight. All right. And then my biggest takeaway from the day, other than that, is that Brandon Marcello was getting so tired of me beating him. Every time he comes on the show, he's sitting at home drinking Dr. Pepper, studying me on YouTube right now. He's watching the tape. He's trying to figure out a weak point to attack. But buddy, there is none, Brandon. I'm gonna keep schooling you every time you come on the show.
I love it. That is a lot of sass in that whole comment there. Good luck with your wife. I can assume that that'll be a fun conversation when she gets home. My final takeaway is I'm not lying, guys. I've been watching the chat all day, and I've never seen it this electric. I'm being totally honest here. We've had conversations about Alabama and Georgia and all these college football powers, but I have never seen you guys as excited and fired up as you are talking about Group of Five schools. There's people saying, yeah, I watched that game too, Chris. It was electric. Talking about the FCS playoffs. I mean, all of this stuff is clearly something that people want to listen to and people want to be discussed. And so we had a lot more things that we wanted to get to today, but weren't able to because we just were diving super deep into these discussions. So now that we know that you're interested in this, we will for sure bring up that Group of Five conversation again. And hopefully we can have both of you guys back on to talk about it. Thank you so much for the great conversation today. Thank you for all the great comments and the likes and all the great responses. As always, we are here on Mondays and Wednesdays at this time at 5 o'clock on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. So you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you Wednesday.